I stared at the email for the third time that morning, reading the words until they blurred. Congratulations on your acceptance to Stanford's MBA program. Please confirm your enrollment by. My chest tightened. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the familiar weight of something I'd carried for 28 years settle deeper into my bones. I walked to the kitchen where my father sat with his newspaper and coffee, the same routine he'd performed every Sunday since I could remember. "Dad," I said quietly, "I got into Stanford." He didn't look up immediately. When he did, his eyes held that distant expression I knew too well, the one that measured me against an invisible standard I never quite reached. "That's good," he said. "When do you start?" "Fall semester, but the tuition." "Take a loan," he said, returning to his newspaper. "You're smart enough to figure it out." The dismissal was so casual it almost didn't register as cruelty. Almost. 3 weeks later, I sat in the living room while my father raised his glass at dinner, beaming with pride I'd never seen directed at me. "To Marcus," he announced, "Harvard MBA, fully funded by the family." My brother grinned, accepting congratulations from relatives who'd gathered to celebrate his achievement. The same relatives who'd sent me congratulatory texts when I got into Stanford. Nothing more. My mother squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. This investment in your future is worth every penny." Investment. The word hung in the air like smoke. I excused myself before anyone noticed I'd stopped breathing. In the bathroom, I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my reflection. 28 years of this pattern, crystallized in a single moment. Marcus's private school tuition while I attended public school because I was more independent. His new car at 16 while I worked 2 jobs to buy my own at 19. His study abroad summers while I stayed home, saving money for a college education I'd have to finance myself. The explanations always sounded reasonable in isolation, but together, they formed an architecture of favoritism so obvious I wondered how I'd pretended not to see it for so long. I returned to the dinner table, smiled through dessert, and drove home in silence. That night, I accepted Stanford's offer and signed the loan documents that would define the next decade of my life. $180,000 in debt before I'd attended a single class. Meanwhile, Marcus's education would cost our parents roughly the same amount. The difference was, he'd graduate with connections, opportunities, and zero financial burden. I'd graduate with expertise, determination, and a monthly payment that would follow me like a shadow. The unfairness of it burned, but not as much as the deeper truth underneath. I wasn't worth the investment. Not in their eyes. That realization didn't arrive dramatically. It settled slowly, like sediment at the bottom of still water, until one day I looked down and saw it clearly. My father had made a calculation, and I'd come up short. So I made my own calculation that night. If they wouldn't invest in me, I'd invest in myself. And I'd make damn sure they'd see what they'd chosen to overlook. Stanford's campus felt like a different planet. The palm trees, and the sandstone buildings, the density of ambition in every conversation. I arrived with 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a debt load that made my hands shake every time I checked my bank account. My roommate, Chen, moved in with his parents' help, boxes of supplies and furniture that made my corner of the room look sparse by comparison. But he didn't make me feel small about it. "First generation?" he asked, noting my efficient packing. "First to pay my own way," I replied. He nodded with understanding. "Same. Welcome to the hustle." The program was brutal from day one. Case studies, group projects, networking events that required wardrobes I didn't own, and confidence I had to manufacture. I worked campus jobs between classes, editing papers for undergrads and tutoring economics to students whose parents paid full tuition without blinking. The irony wasn't lost on me. Meanwhile, Marcus sent family group chat updates about Harvard's social scene, internship offers from consulting firms, and weekend trips to New York. My parents responded with enthusiasm I recognized immediately, the same energy they'd never quite managed when I'd shared my own milestones. When I mentioned landing a research assistant position, my mother replied, "That's nice, honey." When Marcus mentioned the same thing, my father called him directly to celebrate. I stopped sharing updates after that. By the end of first year, I'd established a routine that left no room for resentment or self-pity. I studied harder than everyone else because I had to. I networked more strategically because I couldn't afford to waste opportunities. I learned to read people, systems, tianeng and power structures with precision born from necessity. Debt teaches you things privilege never will. It teaches you that every choice has weight, that every connection matters. That comfort is a luxury you'll have to earn, not inherit. Second year brought a breakthrough. Professor Linda Ortega, who taught organizational strategy, noticed my work on a supply chain optimization case. "This is exceptional," she said after class one day. "Have you thought about consulting?" "Can't afford to take unpaid internships," I replied honestly. She studied me for a moment. "What if it wasn't unpaid?" That conversation led to an introduction to Sterling Dynamics, a mid-sized consulting firm specializing in operational efficiency. The interview process was intense, 3 rounds with partners who asked questions designed to expose weakness. But weakness was something I'd learned to armor against. They offered me a summer associate position with pay that exceeded what I'd made in the previous year combined. I accepted immediately. That summer changed everything. Sterling Dynamics assigned me to a project analyzing supply chain inefficiencies for a manufacturing client. The company was bleeding money through outdated logistics, poor vendor management, and organizational silos that prevented information flow. I spent 12-hour days mapping systems, interviewing staff, and building models that revealed exactly where the problems lived. My manager, David Chen, was demanding but fair. "You see things others miss," he told me during a review. That's rare. By summer's end, I'd helped design a restructuring plan that saved the client $8 million annually. Sterling offered me a full-time position starting after graduation. The salary was more than my father had made at my age. I signed the offer letter in my small apartment, alone, with no one to celebrate with except the relief flooding my chest. When I mentioned the job to my parents during a brief phone call, my mother said, "That's wonderful, dear." Then she asked if I'd heard about Marcus's offer from McKinsey. I had. He'd posted about it on social media with a photo of champagne and colleagues. The comments from our parents were effusive, proud, celebratory. I closed the app and didn't open it again for 3 months. Graduation arrived with sunshine and the weight of completion. I walked across the stage, shook hands with the dean, and accepted my diploma with a smile that felt earned in ways my family would never understand. My parents didn't attend. "It's a long flight," my mother explained, "and your father has that conference." They'd flown to Boston for Marcus's graduation the year before. I didn't bother pointing out the inconsistency. Instead, I celebrated with Chen, Professor Ortega, and a few classmates who'd become actual friends. People who saw me, not the role I was supposed to play. That night, I updated my LinkedIn profile and received a message from David Chen. "Welcome to Sterling. You start Monday. Ready to change some lives?" I was. Sterling Dynamics became my proving ground. For 3 years, I worked on projects that tested every skill I'd developed: crisis management for failing divisions, efficiency overhauls for stagnant companies, leadership development for organizations that didn't know how to grow. I traveled constantly, lived in hotels, survived on coffee and room service, and the relentless drive to prove I belonged in rooms where people assumed I didn't. My debt payments were automatic, consistent, a monthly reminder of the cost of self-sufficiency. But each payment brought me closer to freedom. Meanwhile, Marcus's career trajectory followed a more predictable path. McKinsey projects, promotions, social media posts that highlighted success without acknowledging the foundation it was built on. Our parents talked about him constantly. When I visited for holidays, the questions were always the same. How's work? Fine. Still doing that consulting thing? Yes. Then the conversation would pivot to Marcus, his projects, his girlfriend, his apartment in Manhattan that our parents had helped furnish. I learned to smile through it, to redirect conversations, to leave early without making a scene. By year 4 at Sterling, I'd been promoted twice, senior consultant, then principal. My team respected me because I delivered results and treated people with the competence and dignity they deserved. Clients requested me by name. Partners invited me to strategy meetings. I was building something real, something mine. Then David Chen retired, and the firm began searching for a new managing director. The role would oversee multiple client relationships, guide firm strategy, and shape Sterling's future. It was the kind of position people spent decades working toward. I was 32. You should apply, Professor Ortega told me over coffee one Saturday. We'd stayed in touch, and she'd become something close to a mentor. I don't have enough experience, I replied. You have exactly the experience they need, she countered. You understand systems, people, and how to create value. That's leadership. I submitted my application that night. The interview process took 3 months. Meetings with the board, presentations on firm vision, case studies analyzing hypothetical scenarios. Each round eliminated candidates until only 2 remained, me and Marcus. The realization hit during a casual conversation with one of the partners. Your last name's Collins, right? Any relation to Marcus Collins at McKinsey? My stomach dropped. He's my brother. The partner's eyebrows rose. Small world. He's interviewing for the same role. Of course he was, because in our family, we'd always competed for the same space, the same approval, the same finite resources. The difference was, he'd never had to fight for it. And I had no idea Marcus was even aware of Sterling dynamics. But apparently, McKinsey had recommended him for the role during a strategic partnership discussion. He'd been handed the opportunity. I'd earned my way to it. The final interview was scheduled for the same day, him in the morning, me in the afternoon. I arrived early, sat in the waiting area, and watched my brother exit the conference room with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. He saw me. Stopped. Iris? Marcus. His confusion was genuine. What are you doing here? Interviewing. For what? Managing director. His expression shifted through surprise, realization, then something harder to name. I didn't know you were in the running, he said carefully. I didn't know you were interested in Sterling, I replied. We stood there, siblings and strangers, competing for the same role in a story that had been written long before this moment. May the best candidate win, he said finally, extending his hand. I shook it. I intend to. The interview lasted 2 hours. They asked about leadership philosophy, crisis management, client relationships, and long-term vision. I answered every question with clarity born from years of watching systems, understanding people, and building solutions from the ground up. When they asked why I wanted the role, I didn't mention my brother. I didn't mention my parents. I told them the truth. I want to build something that lasts. I want to lead teams that feel valued and capable. I want clients to trust that we'll solve their hardest problems. And I want to prove that competence and care can coexist at the highest levels. 3 weeks later, I received the call. Iris, this is Jonathan Sterling. We'd like to offer you the managing director position. I sat down slowly, phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding. I accept. We'll announce it Monday. Congratulations. You earned this. That phrase, you earned this. It landed differently than any praise I'd ever received. Because it was true. The announcement went out Monday morning, company-wide email, press release, LinkedIn update. My phone erupted with messages, colleagues, former classmates, Professor Ortega. But the silence from my family was absolute. No call, no text, nothing. By Tuesday afternoon, I understood why. Marcus called. Congratulations, he said, voice tight. Thank you. I didn't realize you were that far along at Sterling. I've been there 6 years. A pause. Dad's upset. About what? He thinks the firm chose you because of optics, diversity hire, that kind of thing. The words hit like ice water. Not because they surprised me, because they confirmed everything I'd always suspected. In my father's eyes, I couldn't simply be good enough. There had to be another explanation. Is that what you think? I asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. I think you've worked hard, but this is a big role. People are going to ask questions. Let them. I ended the call before he could respond. That night, my mother finally texted. We heard about your promotion. Your father is disappointed you didn't mention Marcus was interviewing. It feels like a betrayal. I stared at the message for a long time, and then I typed a single sentence. I didn't betray anyone. I just stopped losing. I blocked the family group chat after that. Not out of anger, out of clarity. They would never see me as anything other than the daughter who required less, achieved despite them, and somehow threatened their narrative by succeeding. So I stopped trying to make them see me. I focused on the people who already did. My first 90 days as managing director were a masterclass in proving myself. Not to my family, to the clients, teams, and stakeholders who'd invested in me. I restructured 3 underperforming accounts, hired 2 new principals, and launched a leadership development program that prioritized mentorship over hierarchy. The firm's revenue increased 18% in the first quarter under my leadership. Clients renewed contracts they'd been considering ending. Team morale, measured through anonymous surveys, reached the highest levels in company history. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes, miscalculated timelines, pushed too hard on projects that needed more patience. But I learned, adjusted, and kept moving forward. That's what people who earn their place do. They adapt. 6 months into the role, Sterling Dynamics secured a major new client, one of the largest manufacturing firms in the country. The CEO wanted a full operational audit, leadership restructuring, and supply chain overhaul. It was a multi-million-dollar contract that would define Sterling's next 3 years. During the kickoff meeting, the CEO asked a question I hadn't anticipated. Who's leading this engagement? I am, I replied. He studied me for a moment. You're young. I'm competent. He laughed, surprised by the directness. Fair enough. Show me what you've got. We spent 6 months embedded in their organization. I assigned teams to different divisions, conducted hundreds of interviews, and built a diagnostic model that revealed exactly where the company was hemorrhaging value. The findings were damning but clear. Middle management was bloated with inefficiency. Supply chain vendors were overcharging by 15%. Leadership silos prevented cross-functional collaboration. And at the top, the C-suite had insulated themselves from ground-level realities. I presented the findings with precision and no apology. This company is dying from the inside, I told the executive team. Not because of market forces, because of choices. You can change that, but it requires honesty and accountability. Silence. Then the CEO leaned forward. What do you recommend? Restructure middle management, replace 3 vendors, create cross-functional leadership teams, and bring in someone from outside your current executive circle to oversee operations. Who? I paused. Someone who understands systems, people, and how to build sustainable value. You have someone in mind? I do. 2 weeks later, they offered me the COO position. Chief Operating Officer of a company with 12,000 employees and $2 billion in annual revenue. It was the kind of role people spent entire careers working toward. I was 33. I accepted. The announcement made industry news. Sterling Dynamics principal named COO of Titan Manufacturing. My phone exploded again, in this time with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, including my father. We need to talk. I ignored it. Then my mother called. I answered, more out of curiosity than obligation. Iris, she said, voice shaking. Why didn't you tell us about this job? Why would I? Because we're your family. Are you? The question hung in the air between us. Your father is very hurt, she continued. He feels like you're shutting us out. I'm protecting myself. From what? From people who only see me when I'm useful or when I make them look bad. She gasped. That's not fair. Neither was telling me to take a loan while funding Marcus's entire education. Silence. That was different, she said finally. How? Marcus needed support. You've always been so independent. I was independent because I had no choice. We did our best. No, I said quietly. You did your best for him. For me, you did the minimum and called it fairness. I ended the call. This time, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It felt like closure. My first year as COO was the hardest professional challenge I'd ever faced. Titan Manufacturing resisted every change I proposed. Middle managers fought restructuring. Vendors pushed back on contract renegotiations. The C-suite questioned my authority in meetings. Subtle jabs disguised as curiosity. But I'd spent my entire life navigating spaces that didn't want me there. I knew how to persist. I built alliances with floor supervisors who understood operations better than any executive. And I replaced vendors who wouldn't negotiate and found better alternatives. I created transparency systems that made inefficiency visible and undeniable. Slowly, the company began to turn. Costs decreased. Efficiency improved. Employee retention stabilized. By year-end, Titan's operating margin had increased by 12%. The board sent a formal commendation. The CEO told me I'd saved the company. But the moment that mattered most came during a routine operational review. The company had hired a consulting firm to assess our restructuring progress. The firm was McKinsey. And the lead consultant assigned to our account was Marcus. I learned about it during a scheduling email. McKinsey team arrives Monday for Q3 review. Lead consultant, Marcus Collins. I read the name 3 times. Then I called the CEO. I need to disclose a potential conflict, I said. The McKinsey lead is my brother. Should we request someone else? No, I replied. Let's see what he has to say. Monday morning, I stood in the conference room as the McKinsey team arrived. Marcus entered last, saw me at the head of the table, and stopped. Our eyes met. He recovered quickly, professional mask sliding into place. Good morning, he said. Thank you for having us. Welcome to Titan, I replied evenly. Let's begin. The next 3 days were surreal. Marcus and his team conducted interviews, reviewed data, and analyzed the systems I'd spent a year rebuilding. I watched him work, observing the methods he'd learned at Harvard and McKinsey. They were competent, but they lacked the depth that comes from necessity. From understanding what it costs to build something from the ground up without a safety net. On the final day, McKinsey presented their findings. Marcus stood at the front of the room, clicking through slides that summarized Titan's progress. The operational restructuring has been highly effective, he said. Leadership has implemented best practices in supply chain management, organizational design, and performance metrics. The results are measurable and sustainable. He paused, then added, "This is some of the best operational leadership I've encountered." The CEO glanced at me with satisfaction, but I kept my eyes on Marcus, because I saw what no one else in that room could see. My brother, finally acknowledging the work I'd done, not because he wanted to, because the data left him no choice. After the presentation, Marcus approached me in the hallway. "Can we talk?" "Here's fine." He glanced around at the passing employees. "I meant privately." "I don't have private conversations with consultants I barely know." His jaw tightened. "Iris, come on. Is there something unprofessional in my demeanor?" "No." "Then we're done here." I turned to leave. "I'm sorry." I stopped. "For what?" I asked without turning around. "For not seeing how hard you worked? For assuming Dad was right about the sterling job? For all of it?" I turned slowly. "You're sorry because I succeeded despite you, not because of how you treated me." "That's not—" "Marcus," I interrupted quietly. "You had every advantage I didn't. Funding, support, belief, and you still barely kept pace. That's not my fault. That's yours." His face paled. "Your report was accurate," I continued. "Titan's turnaround is real. You can include that in your final analysis, but don't mistake professional competence for personal reconciliation. We're not there." I walked away before he could respond. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone had left. The city lights stretched below, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd beaten my brother, because I'd stopped measuring my worth against his. 3 months later, I received a call from my father. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Iris," he said, voice rough. "I need to talk to you about something. Make it quick." "I'm stepping down from my position, health issues. They're looking for a replacement." "I'm sorry to hear that." "The company asked me for recommendations. I gave them your name." I sat up straighter. "What?" "You're the best person for the role." I told them that. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Why?" I finally asked. "Because it's true." "You didn't think so when I needed Stanford tuition?" The line went quiet. "I made a mistake," he said finally. "I prioritized Marcus because I thought he needed more support. I thought you'd be fine without it." "I was fine, but I would have been better with it." "I know." Those 2 words carried weight I hadn't expected. "I'm not applying," I said. "Why not?" "Because I don't need your validation anymore. I already have mine." He exhaled slowly. "Fair enough." Before he hung up, he added, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." I should have said that years ago. "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." I ended the call and deleted his number. Not out of cruelty, out of completion. 5 years after that conversation, I stand in my office at Titan Manufacturing as CEO, a promotion I earned through results, leadership, and the kind of perseverance that only comes from necessity. The company is thriving, my team is strong, the board trusts my vision, and my student loans are paid off, every single dollar, early. Marcus and I exchange polite messages on birthdays. My mother sends occasional emails I rarely answer. My father passed away 2 years ago, and I attended the funeral with respect, but not grief. I built a life he never invested in, and that life is more valuable than anything he could have given me, because I know what it cost. I know what I sacrificed, what I carried, what I overcame. And I know that the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's becoming undeniable. Last week, Marcus sent me a message. Saw the profile on you in Forbes. Congratulations. You were right. You earned it. I read it twice. Then I archived it without responding. Some acknowledgments come too late to matter. The only person whose belief I ever truly needed was my own, and I've had that for years now. I stand at my office window, looking out at the city below, and I think about the woman I was at 28, staring at that Stanford acceptance letter with fear and determination tangled together. I wish I could tell her what I know now, that the people who don't invest in you are making a statement about themselves, not you. That debt, literal and emotional, can be paid off. That success tastes sweeter when you build it yourself. And that the moment you stop trying to earn love from people who've already decided you're not worth it, you become free. Not bitter, not broken, free. My assistant knocks lightly. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. I'll be right there. I close the laptop, straighten my jacket, and head toward the boardroom. Where I belong, where I built my place, where no one can tell me to take a loan ever again. Because I already paid my dues. And I came out on top. Not because of them, in spite of them. And that makes all the difference.